Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the John King Saga, my YouTube channel. I am here today with one of my favorite people in the community, the esteemed Dr. Fantasy himself, brilliant academic, wonderful booktuber, and fabulous author of the Eden trilogy, the wonderful Philip Chase. And we're here today as part of an ongoing series of discussions to do the second chat that we're having. The first one was on Philip's channel for the first book, and now the second book here is on my channel, and we're discussing Enemy of God by Bernard Cornwell, book 2 of the Warlord Chronicles. Fantastic Arthurian. I guess we can debate all day about whether it's historical fantasy, historical fiction, pseudo, whatever you want to call it, but it's good, folks. It's good. At least I think it's amazing. Philip seemed to like the first book, so can't wait to hear what he has to say about the second book. So, Philip, first of all, how you doing? And any overall thoughts about book 2?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, PL, for having me on. And I've really enjoyed our first discussion a lot. I'm looking forward to this very much. It's always a joy and a pleasure and an honor to chat with you, my friend. Yeah, so in terms of my overall thoughts on Enemy of God, I'm keeping this spoiler free in case somebody out there is watching just the beginning of this. I loved it. To keep it succinct, I loved it. It is brutal, though. It is I was actually just was texting with Alan from the Library of Alexandria, and he wanted to know what I thought. And we agreed that it is a brutal book. It takes it's a grittier, even. I mean, the first book had plenty of bad things happening and difficulties, and it's Dark Age Britain, and it's gloomy and it's foggy, and it's this one. There were some really visceral, difficult losses in here that the tone definitely got darker, I would say, in the second book. And although it's funny because I don't think it's a spoiler to say this, but there is a certain character who does inject a bit of humor into Enemy of God that I really enjoyed. There's a particular character, you know who I'm talking about, I'm sure. Kind of a crotchety character, but there are certain moments. And also, I'm baiting those people out there who might be no, it's historical fiction camp, but there's obvious magic in Enemy of God. There's obvious magic. There are several moments which we can point to and say, no, there's no other explanation for this except for magic, which in my brain says fantasy. So
we're slamming the cudgel down.
Yeah.
The ruling from Dr. Fantasy is that the Warlord Chronicles is fantasy.
Yeah.
So take that, you people who think it's historical fiction.
Yeah. I mean, it also, there's very little history to this at all. I mean, he's got the vibe in some ways. He admits himself at the end. If you read his little blurb at the end, he says, look, I took huge liberties here. I made up places. Not everything that I did in here, I know it really fits. I know some things are anachronistic, so I'm not really pretending this is history, in other words. So I don't see where you get much of the historical, except that he does give you the vibe of Dark Age Britain. That's about it, though. There's no actual history to this at all. But
yeah, no, I would agree. He very much gives you a feeling of this nascent Britain. But I think I agree with you. The difference between The Winter King, the first book, and Enemy of God for me was that in Winter King, the magic seemed more the product of other people's superstitions, thinking that, they must be able to do the Druids and must be able to do this. But really and truly, it didn't amount to much.
Right, and there was room for you to believe, okay, they're just being fooled into thinking it's magic. But in here, I don't think there's any space for that,
Yeah, exactly. Clearly, some things that happened during this book were definitely magical. So, and we're going to get into that quickly. Welcome, of course, everyone who's joining. Oh, great. Another amazing booktuber, to the Ramble. Hey, what's up? This is Book 1 review. Great to see the book 2 discussion kicking off tonight.
While Austin is here, I want to propose something, because he and Richard are reading this alongside Ed and Will over at the Brothers Gwyn. I'm proposing live on air that all of us get together, the five of us, and talk about the third book, which is, what is it, Excalibur, I think? Is that
Excalibur.
Why don't all five of us get together and talk about the trilogy when we're all done? How about that, Austin?
That's a brilliant idea. Austin,
I'll organize it. I'll organize it.
There you go. Philip's offering to do the heavy lifting on his channel. So I think that's an offer that you can't refuse. So let's see if we can make that happen. And now we also have another brilliant mind in the chat.
Ah, yes.
Awesome, Mick Garfield. How you doing, my friend?
There he is. And Mick Garfield is one of the few whose book 2 is not his favorite. It's his least favorite in the trilogy. So
okay. Dissenting opinion there. We love to hear from him why.
We have a dissenter in the chat. So,
and I think Challenge accepted that Tudor Ramble is they sound good to go. Now we just have to get a hold of those fabulous young fellas.
Yeah,
they wanna join us. So
I will organize it.
We have Upper Norwood. Thanks so much for coming out. Is it obvious magic or is it unlikely events which happen every now and then?
We're getting pushback, PL. We're getting pushback.
I know people are resisting. People are resisting. So we're gonna have to justify our thoughts there. Welcome Heidi for joining it as well, and she also finds this to be
a book 2 fan. Yep.
Yeah, to be her favorite book. So perhaps we can get into some of the elements, and especially one thing that I think we leaned into in the last discussion was we definitely delved into the characters.
Yeah.
So if it's all right with you, Philip, I would love to start off with the character of Arthur, who is normally supposed to be the titular character.
He is the enemy, enemy of God. Yeah, we're going into spoilers then, right?
Yeah. So folks, for those of you who are watching now, we're going to full spoiler territory. So if you have not read Enemy of God, come back and watch this chat after you've read the book, because we're going to full-blown spoiler territory. I need to get a little banner, spoiler banner. I'm not as good.
I don't have one either. It's too technical for me, PL. It's beyond my technical capabilities.
So we have an Arthur here that, frankly, Philip, I spent most of the book for me just going, "You idiot! Why? These decisions that you're making, some of them. I mean, you have to love Arthur because he is so optimistic, and he has this almost naive, belief in, I can craft peace. Even when peace isn't necessarily warranted, right? And he also really works hard, to his credit. He wants collaboration. He wants consensus. He wants the peace and the alignment to be willing, not forced. He does force it, and he knows he's forcing it in many cases. But then while he's doing all this, in a way, underneath him, the entire Britain is becoming more and more fractured from both a theological and an identity and a cultural standpoint. But he just continues, do good Arthur. He's just going along trying to make everybody kiss and hug and make up, and I
literally kiss and hug and make up.
Yeah. How did you find that aspect of, and not just that aspect, but Arthur in general in this book?
So I think that Arthur is a visionary. He is someone who sees the world differently from the way most people see it. And that is both a strength and a weakness, because it is the visionaries who achieve great things, who drag the rest of us along with them in order to change the world. And I think that you see that in Arthur as a leader, in the devotion that our wonderful narrator, Derfel, has for him as a leader, as a friend. It even overcomes several moments where he disagrees very strongly with what Arthur's doing. But he knows that because of who Arthur is, this is what he does. In the moment when he goes along with, and even I would say, brings about the death of Iseult and Tristan, who betrays. He gives them away to Mark because he's following his ideals. We swore a vow. You cannot go against the king's justice. This has to. Mark is a king, therefore this can't fly. He's following his ideals all the way. This is what Arthur does repeatedly. It's also why he doesn't realize what everybody else realizes about Guinevere. He sees Guinevere as he wants her to be, not as she is. That's Arthur. He sees the world as he wants it to be, not as it is. And he is going to do his utmost to realize that world and pull people along with him, and succeeds to a large degree. But also it does come unraveled because he's dealing with mere mortals who are flawed and who are constantly bickering and fighting, and they're selfish. And he's too trusting of people like Lancelot, obviously, because he sees what he wants Lancelot to be, not what Lancelot is, which is the worst piece of garbage ever. So she's unfortunately, that idealism does blind him to a lot of things, and that's the whole package. Really, is just somebody with great ideals who pursues them to the utmost. You have to have a certain blindness to persevere, right? A normal person would despair, where Arthur just keeps going and keeps insisting, no, we're going to have peace, we're going to be together, and he keeps insisting on it, to the point where he's annoying everybody. He's making Derfel hug Lancelot and all that. So but yeah, that is somebody that's a visionary, and sometimes visionaries succeed, but they are rarely compromising, in a sense. You know what I mean? There are certain leaders who are effective because they compromise, but they're not usually the visionaries. Arthur is a visionary, and he's trying to achieve this dream, which is beyond, it's a matter of his just unyielding faith that this is going to happen, but unfortunately he's dealing with a very flawed world in the meantime. So what's your take on Arthur?
Well, I think, and those are some excellent points, Philip. I think for me, one would argue that, and as much as I believe you're correct, that it is the visionaries, the ones who embrace the vision of a better world and a way to move forward, and an insistence on our ability to be our better selves and have, see our better nature come to the forefront. Mm-hmm. He ignores his wife's infidelity. He ignores his wife's almost ruthless ambition.
I would say he's incredibly, though, like, you could say he ignores it, but that would imply that he actually knew it was happening.
Yes.
And his reaction when Nimue rips the curtain aside is like he's genuinely shocked. Like, whoa, what? This isn't my Guinevere, right? I mean, he is just genuinely, completely shocked. So ignoring me, I mean, he's clueless about it.
Clueless, sorry, that's a much better word. I should substitute, because for some people it's the worst kept secret in Britain.
Yeah, I mean everybody but Arthur knew,
Yeah, so you have to wonder, being so obtuse about that, and being so obtuse about the fact that now perhaps Guinevere wasn't willful blindness, but let's take something like Mordred. Arthur knows that Mordred is not a good person, and knows that he is not fit to be a king. And that by the end of the book, he is forced to come to that realization and forced to essentially install himself as the actual leader and Mordred as a figure, when he actually has definitive proof of Mordred's treachery. Yeah. But at the same time, had he listened to all his advisors, people like Derfel and Coach and all these people who actually were raising Mordred or had more interactions with him, if he would have acknowledged a long time ago that, the same way Merlin always says he should have been drowned at birth, Arthur might have come to that conclusion himself. And Arthur's, insistence and his adherence to essentially the divine right of kings, and that, there is a hierarchy, and kings are at the top, and as flawed as they might be, and as wrong as that might be, as immoral as they might be. For the example of Mark, we know that Mark is a horrible, horrible person. Yeah. But, his will shall be done because he's the king, and the hierarchy of kings, princes, and princesses, even queens right below. And Arthur is going to uphold justice, the justice that he believes that Mark is entitled to.
Yeah.
And as you said, even over and above betraying his friend, Derfel goes out of his way to remind, and specifically with the example, the tragedy of Tristan and Isolde, and it's a beautiful version, I think, this version compared to the other interpretations of this tale of Tristan and Isolde. So is that, Derfel reminds Arthur, Tristan stood with us at this time. He was one of the few when so many people deserted us. So clearly, we have to stick by him, right? And Arthur doesn't, he doesn't respond. He doesn't give anything away. And in the end, he simply says, I'm sorry, man. Mark's will has to prevail here. I have to, treat this as treason, and they're subject to execution, and people die. So, as much as we admire Arthur for his principles, and we respect the decision in terms of, clearly it was a difficult decision for him, we're also, I think, all appalled by the fact that some of these decisions seem to be made without the benefit of a certain hindsight and with an extreme deference for authority, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So,
but that's the social order that he is striving for. He believes in. It's funny because the story many times shows us how he's not a particularly religious person, but this vision of his is his religion in a sense, to the point where I think he may be deluding himself at times. Mordred's a good example. I will say though, I think that he just sort of gives Mordred to first Kilhuch and then later to Derfel, and just says, "Hey, Derfel, you gotta fix him, okay? Just fix him, And if that's about it, and then, okay, I'm off to do my thing, make him a good king, and he's deluding himself when he's insisting, no, he's going to be the king, he's going to be a good king, until finally, Mordred loses everything due to his own stupidity and his. Frankly, his wickedness. He's incompetent as well as a just terrible human being. So if Arthur's finally forced to get to the point where, okay, fine, Mordred's going to be king in name, but I'm going to run things. And this is when everybody, especially Derfel, but everybody else is like, yes, we can get behind this. And that's the point where they can turn the tide against Lancelot and company, and those two nasty twin druids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's funny. My overall comment is watch out for twins in general in Cornwell's work, because they tend to be bad for some reason.
Did he have a twin? Did Cornwell have a twin?
I'm not sure. I haven't read his biography, but we have the twins. There are a set of twins. I won't spoil it in Bernard Cornwell's Saxon stories that are kind of bad, and similarly they're priests, such as we also have in Warlord. If it's okay with you, while we're on this subject of Mordred, I'd like to talk a bit about Mordred. I don't think we devoted a lot of time to him in the previous chat, but you have Mordred who and to give him some fairness here, we see a moment of vulnerability in terms of Mordred is sad and mourns his mother's death.
Yes,
right? And the manner in which he was killed, which is horrible, by the evil Gundulus who rammed the sword down her throat. He feels that all of the perpetrators were never totally brought to justice, and he also, I think he mourns for the loss of that mother figure. It isn't just about the fact that his mother died; he also mourns for that mother figure. And one might wonder, perhaps, if he had that influence in his life, if he would have turned out, so horrible. But Mordred is horrible. He almost puts out Derfel's infant daughter's eye with a needle. He's, rampaging. He's sexually assaulting women. He's just horrible, right? Yeah. He's horrible. And then he actually turns treacherous and actually is willing to see Arthur killed and the entire kingdom destabilized.
Yep.
Because he's essentially fooled by those who have bad intentions. And
Right.
what Mordred, of course, in many of the other interpretations, is the one who ultimately causes the downfall of Arthur. There's no spoiler there.
Right.
So I'm sure you're wondering what will happen with this particular individual that he's been kept alive. He's someone like Samson. He slithers out of real facing real consequences. What did you think about the character of Mordred?
Yeah, no, I will agree with you that there is that moment of vulnerability when he asks Derfel at his mother's grave, "Did she love me? Did she love me?" And that is the one moment where we do see an attempt to humanize this character. Otherwise, he's a piece of garbage. He's terrible, and he's horrible. And I have to think now there are certain elements of this that, for example, I knew from the beginning that something was going to be going on and some hanky-panky between Lancelot and Guinevere, because that's what happens in all the Arthurian stories. So I didn't think Cornwell would diverge from the standard Arthurian story that much. I also feel that he's not going to diverge. Now, I don't know, so this is not a spoiler. I have not read book 3 yet, but I would guess that Mordred and is going to be the cause of Arthur's death. And maybe, as it's usually portrayed, like if you read Mallory's Morte d'Arthur, there's an iconic moment when they meet each other in combat. It's that everybody's dead. It's blood and guts everywhere, and Mordred and Arthur. Arthur, I think, stabs Mordred with a spear, and then Mordred actually pulls himself further onto the spear in order to strike Arthur on the head, and gives him his death wound. So I would imagine that we're going to have some version of this in Cornwell. Let's see how he handles it. But I'd be surprised if Mordred and Arthur are not the cause of each other's death. But all that said, I do think that he is, and of course, in all those other versions, though, Mordred is Arthur's son. And here he is not. He's his nephew, I guess.
His
half nephew. Yeah.
Yes.
So Cornwell has diverged in other places, so maybe he will do so again. But I'm guessing he'll want to keep the pathos of that moment when these two kill each other. But we'll see. But yeah, so Mordred is, he's. I think that one moment was the most interesting when he asked Derfel, "Did she love me?" And I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for Mordred in that moment. I will confess, there was a bit of a little spark of empathy that went off in me, maybe. But otherwise, I mean, he completely self-centered, a self-centered brute, really, and a bully. Who, as you said, he picks on other kids. He tried to poke out one of Derfel's daughter's eyes. I can't remember which one it was. Was it Dian? Was it the youngest?
I think it was Dian.
Yeah. So he's a little brute and a toad, and oh well.
Yeah, and as much as you as you said, there's that moment there with Derfel, and you wonder, okay, is there any hope for redemption here from this character? But soon you realize that there's not. But the one thing that when I think of this interpretation of Arthur, and you mentioned all the other ones, and you so ably described, my mind always goes back to I can't remember what year the movie was made, the Excalibur movie. It's a very old movie, but brilliant, with the Wagner score, and that is one of my favorite movies of all time. And obviously, the Morte d'Arthur is a near and dear book to my heart. I think it's my favorite book of all the Arthurian books. That so much of the entire last battle is there's that moment in most interpretations, regardless of your interpretation, where Arthur has a chance not to fight Mordred, and people warn him, don't engage him, because if you do, you'll die.
Yeah, there's all these prophecies, and
but he goes ahead. So I think you will be interested to see how you find whatever happens in book 3.
It's one of those moments where they're about to broker peace, and then a snake bites one of the knights, and he takes out his sword and he hacks the snake, and everybody thinks the battle started, and then all hell breaks loose. So we were this close, and then boom. Yeah.
Well, can't run from prophecy, Philip. You can't run.
If he does the snake thing, I have to think it's going to be by like magical means. Like Nimue seems to like snakes.
Well, we shall see. Just a few
snakes. I do love that moment when she does lets the snakes out of the bag.
Yeah,
so to speak.
That was awesome.
Yeah. So what is Mix Garfield saying here?
It says it should be mentioned that this is all from Derfel's perspective. That is true. I hate to throw out the unreliable narrator trope, willy-nilly.
Yeah.
But there are some hints. Derfel's perspective is subjective. Yes, I mean, it would seem that empirically that yes.
More than hints, because Derfel says it himself in the first book. Yeah, I'm writing this account for Igraine, and she's going to have her translator change it. So I'm just going to make up my own stuff right now, too, He pretty much says that in the first book, and that is, I think, Cornwell's acknowledging to us in a kind of meta way that this is not really history. This is made up stuff, and we're going to sometimes make it more compelling than history would have been, if we were sticking to the facts. Which is what Derfel does. He even says, yeah, I changed the battle because I felt like it worked better as a story this way, So he himself tells us, hey, I'm unreliable, I think that's fair. That's a good observation from Max Garfield. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Mac, for that. And Heidi asks, so do you notice the last kingdom location in the book? The old Roman Aquabats Spa. I'm not sure if you got that far in the Last Kingdom.
I've only read the first book in the Saxon stories, so that is the Last Kingdom.
Yes.
I have not watched the TV show.
You haven't watched the TV show either. Okay. So that's fair. So maybe when you read the books, you'll notice that. And Garfield puts up the Drew twins are sad to me rather. Milquetoast the Tameless, give her the deviousness, the utter villain Gundulus and his Druid Tenebers that Derfel break the taboo to her. It's so cool. Yeah, no, definitely.
They are the grandsons of Tenebers.
Yes. So, and there are some comments. Max Garfield goes on to make some further comments, which we'll get to. So perhaps we can turn now, since we're on Highness characters, we can turn to Lancelot and, what he does in this book. Lancelot, dabbling with Guinevere aside, because that's also part of the Isis ritual, and she's dabbling with more than Lancelot. But at the same time, Guinevere has taken Arthur's rejection of seizing power, like actually declaring himself a king, and denying the chance for their son, Guidry, to be the king, as essentially rejection of her intelligence, a rejection of her wisdom in the plan, and a rejection of the fact that Mortimer isn't fit. He's unfit, and you are, Arthur. You need to do this. So Guinevere decides to essentially pray to the goddesses to have Lancelot be installed as king. So this is an ultimate betrayal of Arthur. This isn't just the infidelity part. This is more than that. Now, Lancelot, in this book, he pisses Arthur off to no end because he essentially goes around Arthur's back and forms, an alliance with Cedric, one of the Saxon kings, and does some pretty shady stuff that Arthur has to live with, but still has hope that Lancelot will turn around. He'll be a good king. Lancelot installs himself, as already predicted, in the Sea Palace, because the kingdom he was given is pretty penurious and downtrodden, and he sets himself up, very close to the seat of power, so that when the time comes, he can do his dastardly deeds. Again, we've never seen. For me, this was the first time I read an interpretation, an Arthurian interpretation of Lancelot, where he was so despicable. What were your thoughts on Lancelot in this book?
Yeah, I think he's a narcissist. I mean, look at him with all his mirror collection. What kind of idiot puts mirrors all over the place so he can see himself? Yeah, I think that he's, to me, actually, of all the villainous characters, I'm not going to disagree with McGarfield about the Druid twins. And Lancelot, to me, is a typical narcissist who just is incredibly selfish and destructive in his selfishness. Guinevere is the interesting one to me. And I think that Nimue's interpretation of her is actually spot on. When Nimue explains Guinevere to Derfel, it's actually a pretty key moment. And you actually started to talk about it a little bit there a moment ago when you were describing Guinevere's motives for turning from supporting Arthur to supporting Lancelot. Because as Nimue points out, Arthur ignored her talents. He wanted to turn her into a milch cow, to turn her into a housewife. And this is a woman with not only ambition, but also great intelligence. And he was not giving her an outlet for it. He wasn't listening to her. He wasn't, and that's not to excuse, by the way, everything that Guinevere does. Not saying go. I'm not Team Guinevere here, but I will say that it is partly a disaster of Arthur's own making once again, because he, yes, again, is seeing Guinevere the way he wants her to be rather than who she is, which is a very intelligent, capable, ambitious woman. And when she's not given the opportunity to pursue her ambitions through him, she turns elsewhere, and the whole thing with Isis would not have happened either if she had been properly listened to, if she had been given a place on the council, for example. She wouldn't have needed all that silly stuff. She wouldn't have needed it. So I think she's a fascinating character in all of that she's not just a mustache twirling villain. Oh, she would look weird with mustache, of course, but you know what I mean, right? I mean, she's not, I feel like of all the characters who bring about the destruction in this story, Guinevere is the most interesting to me. And Lancelot, he's just he's a fairly flat character, honestly, to me. He is obnoxious and vain and narcissistic, and everybody can just agree that he's horrible. There's not much more to him, honestly. And whereas those two Druid twins, they're also, they're a little, they're partly on the vengeance train because of Derfel killing their grandfather and all of that, but also they're after power, and all of that. So, but Guinevere, she's pretty interesting,
Yeah, and maybe perhaps we'll turn to Guinevere next as we speak about characters. And I actually I highlighted quickly that section
where Nimue is talking about her.
Yeah. So where she says, so she broke her marriage. This is to Derfel. She broke her marriage oath. Do you think she's the first, or do you think one makes her whore? In which case, Britain's full to the rim with whores. She's no whore, Derfel. She's a strong woman who was born with a quick mind and good looks. And Arthur loved the looks and wouldn't use her mind. He wouldn't let her make him king, and so she turned to that ridiculous religion of hers. And all Arthur did was tell her how happy she'd be when he could hang up Excalibur and start beating cattle. So, and what I love about this is that, this is of course, we're dealing with Britain in the 4th, 5th century, obviously patriarchal and certainly misogynistic, and where it's all about the strength of men, and women are typically in the background and in a much secondary, tertiary role. And that most of the interpretations I find of Arthur, Guinevere is either portrayed as evil or weak. But I love that Cornwell gives her a much more nuanced portrayal here, that she's smart, she's cunning, she's ambitious, and it is out of perhaps partially boredom and partially frustration that she betrays Arthur, right? And I love this much more nuanced portrayal of her. She's clearly seductive. She clearly knows that she has that power of seduction over men. She knows her wiles. But she also is, because she feels she's not being recognized for her wits. That's what leads to so many problems.
Yeah, I have to think that George R. R. Martin read this and partly based Circe on Cornwell's portrayal of Guinevere. There's a lot of similarity, I think, between the two characters.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And Max Crawford says, I found the motivation for Guinevere's betrayal bewildered, especially when comparing Arthur to the opinions of her core conspirators towards her. They were so much more antagonistic against her.
Antagonism.
Yeah, and we have to remember too that Guinevere was obviously the nemesis of the Christian religion, and
right.
she definitely saw that, unlike not the way Merlin and Niue did, but she saw it as a threat, right, and something to be curtailed.
So she does hold hands with Sansom there. Well, Lancelot and Sansom's their whole plan to get rid of Arthur was pretty feeble, honestly. Like, let's send him over to this place where there's this guy who's rolling around in the mud and with a bunch of dirty, ill-armed, peasant followers, and they'll take care of Arthur, right? I mean, what a dumb plan. And they just assumed that he was dead. And then afterwards, oh no, he's dead. He's dead. Even when they knew he was alive, they're like, oh no, Arthur's dead. Just forget about Arthur.
Yeah, don't look over there.
That's a pretty incompetent plan. I have to feel like they did not consult Guinevere on that one.
But. Yeah, I have to agree. And the wonderful Joanna Reed's brilliant booktuber. Please check out Joanna's Reed channel if you haven't for some reason.
Absolutely.
You're not aware. Joanna's marvelous. Thanks so much, Joanna, for coming out. She says, I knew feel that way about Guinevere. Philip, and she also agrees and says, yes, I feel the connection between.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So now perhaps we can turn to, you talked about comic relief, you talked about, sarcasm and snark, and everybody I think loves those characters in fantasy. He had so many great lines. He there's one I remember he said about that I think I'm doomed to live among idiots. Is the world mad at me? Like, every time I read Merlin's lines, I just started laughing. So Merlin, now mind you, Merlin almost dies in this book because he is pursuing the most important, arguably, treasure of Britain, the cauldron, and he drags Derfel and Siwyn and a bunch of warriors along and Niue and a bunch of warriors along on this quest. That succeeds. They manage to cunningly outwit, and through magic, of course, seemingly, outwit the evil Irish king. You have the pronunciation probably much better than I, Philip. Lewin. I can't pronounce that very well.
The kingdom. The king's name is Diurnach.
Yes, and the kingdom is Lewin. How was that?
Is it a double L?
Yes.
I think it is double Luyn. Is that it?
I think it's double Leyn.
E? Okay, so that would be Slayen.
Slayen. Okay. Slayen.
You gotta kind of spit when you say the L. You gotta go Slayen. Yeah.
Slayen.
Your screen should be covered in spit right
now. So I mean, this and Max Garfield said that as a villain, I agree, he had some really cool potential, but the whole quest ended abruptly. So this is, and again, it's also one of my favorite parts of the book. Heidi mentions the Dark Road, so that's the road leading to the island where the cauldron's supposed to be held. It was one of my favorite parts of the book. Everybody loves a nice side quest, but let's not forget that for most people, this is Cornwell's version of the quest for the Holy Grail. I mean, it's a cup. People equate it typically because it's a cup, as the Holy Grail was. Now this quest, doesn't start off on a good note because it is foretold that Merlin will die unless they obtain the cauldron. And immediately on the road, he starts to get sick, get ill, and seems like he's dead almost, just as they discover the cauldron. But Merlin, throughout this book, like I said, with that quote I had, I'm like, he's always just disparaging everybody. Like, I'm surrounded by idiots. Doesn't anyone understand what's going on? I'm the only one that has any sense. Like, I love the way he cuts everybody down, and but also he is so he almost takes a back seat as well in many parts of this book. He he's humbled a bit in this book in certain parts, and we see him
when Cherdich cuts his beard. And hands it
when
over
the Saxon king cuts his beard, and that holds immense power supposedly over Jews. Having a huge beard is not only is a disgrace, but you can potentially, one of the biggest problems is that you can have power over them. And we see him at sometimes almost retired and just willing to chill out, in Derfel's, residence, and just kind of seemingly just, be neutered almost, like, but yet we know Merlin's cunning as a fox, right? Yeah. And you have to figure he's got something up his sleeve. How did you see Merlin as a character in this installment?
Yeah, well, first of all, my favorite Merlin moment is when they're on the top of the hill fort. They're surrounded by their enemies. It's at night. Merlin has basically died. Cynwyn essentially has said he's stopped breathing. He's dead. And Nimwe's, no, he's not dead. He's not dead. And then when Merlin wakes up, the first thing he says is, "I don't suppose there's any cheese." And then he goes into a lecture about the virtues of soft cheese versus his distaste for hard cheese. And he's going on, and he's scolding Derfel for not having soft cheese, and on and on. I love the way he scolds Derfel, and Derfel he's like a big patient rock. And just like, yes, okay, Lord, all right. He's like a father to me, so I just, hem and haw. And I love that. So yeah, the dynamic between Merlin and so many other characters can be a lot of fun. At the same time, in the same way that Arthur is a victim of his ideals, Merlin is also another Ahab-like character, someone who's obsessed, who's got this very, purpose that is driving him is to get these treasures so that he can revive the old gods, bring back the old gods, go back to the way things were. And that also, I think, is as perceptive as he is and cunning as he is, that compromises him in some ways. That singular vision of his, it does make him less compassionate, less humane sometimes. So he's he's probably my favorite character in the trilogy, honestly. And I'm glad that Cornwell did the anachronistic thing, including Merlin, because Merlin doesn't come up in the original, Arthurian stories. He's an addition, like Lancelot, So I do love, though, that he's given him this kind of crotchety, really, humorous personality. He always is the smartest person in the room, but he's not always going to let on that what he's thinking. So, but yeah, he does some clever things here and there. But again, I think that singularity, that just being so, he's got his own blinders, and it doesn't always. Things aren't always for the best when Merlin gets his way, I think.
No, I'd have to agree. And quickly, I just have to give a shout out to one of my dear friends, Bjorn Larson, brilliant author himself of Dark Fantasy. Hey, Bjorn, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it. He's not going to get spoiled. He says he's popping by to say hello, but he says I'll get to reading Cornwell, I promise. You won't be disappointed, my friend. Brilliant stuff. I know you'll like it. Check out Bjorn's books. Great satirist, fantasy satirist as well, and also writes some fabulous dark fantasy with his 10 Worlds series, which is all Norse-inspired fantasy. So
with a name like Bjorn Larson, it's shocking that it would be Norse-inspired.
Bjorn is a Norse expert, so if you want to know about all things Norse, Bjorn is someone that, and he's so generous with his time, someone to reach out to be educated about all things Norse. So Joanna commented that she loves the humor in the trilogy. Much of it supplied by Merlin again. And that is amazing. She also says that negative side of ambition is definitely explored. And Mark Scarfield comments, that explains why the Brownies love
the cheese. Yeah,
cheese.
I actually texted them when I read that line. I had to text Ed and laugh and say Merlin reminds me of you. Yeah.
That is awesome. So also we also have to, as we're coming on the 45-minute mark, we should definitely talk about Derfel, which we haven't addressed. The actual narrator of the entire thing. And it's interesting because you have the two timelines going with Derfel, narrating this entire trilogy for the benefit of hindsight, because he's an old man and now he's a monk and he's converted to Christianity, right? And that it's very interesting to see Derfel where he is at this stage of his life, because now he's to Kywin, he has children, he's taken on a lot of extra responsibility in raising Mordred. He has a position at some point as the champion of the High King, and he there a lot happens to, but he also undergoes some immense tragedy. Lancelot's brood, including the evil twins, kill his daughter. And he exacts revenge, a horrible revenge on the twins by the end of the book. It's a very brutal storyline. And obviously, tear jerking. And we also see Derfel is very much part of, because one part of the book is split into 4 parts, I believe. One part of the book is entitled Camelot, and Derfel tells Igraine when he's talking to her about Arthur's reign that there was no Camelot. It was never. But there was a period of essentially peace.
He didn't call it that. Yeah,
he didn't call it that. And he always bursts her bubble, which she hates, about that's not the way it happened. We didn't say that. And of course
she's like, I'm just gonna have my translator fix it.
Exactly. But this period of peace seemingly turned out to be an illusion, right? Because really, as peace usually is, it's just a precursor for war. And the undercurrents and things that are brewing, Derfel is, raising his family and doing these things. But meanwhile, the time, what's coming is war. And, part of what Derfel's wrapped up in, and it's funny how eventually, of course, he does convert, is the onset of a Christianity and the clash between Christianity and the other religions, where the Christians seem hell-bent on, the Christians aren't characterized, as you mentioned earlier, Philip, I think it was the previous discussion, they're not characterized, most of them, as being very, very good. Their force is deepening, but they're leading essentially the cultural and religious war to, wipe out paganism, right? And, but Derfel is on the cusp of all these things. He's also dealing with the fact that he's a Saxon by birth, and they're in the middle of, the Britons are in the middle of fighting the Saxons, and we find that the Saxon leader, and again, you forget the pronunciation. I pronounce it Ale, Aelle. He is someone who Derfel has an affinity for, and the implications is that they have a deeper relationship than that, right?
Turns out to be his father.
Right? That so it's very complicated for Derfel during this period. He's dealing with a lot, but I think punctuated by his utter feeling of betrayal when Arthur sides with Mark and Tristan and Isolde are executed. He falls out with Arthur for a time. Yep. And, people are trying to reconcile them, but Derfel's like, he's done with Arthur for a while. So those are just some of the things that Derfel undergoes. What did you think of Derfel's character during this? this period.
Yeah, I'm mostly, of course, on board. I love him as a narrator, and I think he's a great character. He's flawed, of course, when he does go after his vengeance against the twins. He's a grieving father, of course, but he's also a very fierce warrior. And what he and Nimue do to them is I could not get behind. It's just that's beyond the pale. That's okay. I mean, it's one thing to go after someone who killed your daughter and kill them in kind. It's another thing to do whatever. It doesn't go into graphic detail, but you can use your imagination. What they do to them is mutilate them and string out their deaths as long
Yes.
and painfully as possible. And Nimue even basically says, yeah, I mean, we just took those beautiful creatures and took every piece by piece, took everything away from them. And I'm not all on board with that, nor am I on board with Arthur, by the way, slaughtering all of Guinevere's attendants in her little Isis temple. Once he finds out Guinevere's been cheating on him, I think that's horrible. That he takes out his fury on them, and even then he can't lift a finger to Guinevere. He's mad at her, but he takes it out on those people who are okay. They're not innocent because they were. And you could argue that he does it because he can't have them as witnesses to his dishonor or whatever. But really, he's acting in a fury in that moment. So the good characters, in other words, do some horrible things in this book, including Derfel, whom I'm usually 100% behind, but not when he's torturing the twins in that way. I mean, it could have been a simple matter of vengeance, eye for an eye. I'll kill you because you did that to my daughter. But that was really something. So yeah, and I don't think that Cornwell means for us to be cheering for them in that moment. Like if you're cheering when Arthur is slaughtering all those people, I think that's the wrong reaction, probably. Like you're supposed to be chilled by that, and I think you're supposed to see it as a flaw in him as well. That he's maintained this rigid ideals no matter what. Nope, this is the way the world is. I'm going to make it this way. This is how it is, and he's confronted with evidence to the contrary that he cannot resist, and his reaction is he snaps, he breaks, he's kind of brittle in that way. So yeah, with Derfel though, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a cool touch to have him turn. A little bit of a coincidence that DM we're talking about, right? Yeah. To have it's a bit of a fridge thing, I guess, that we didn't really know her especially well. She gets a fever. We know that at a certain point, Derfel says that she's the most like him, that she's the feisty one, and on and on. We don't get to know her though as a character particularly well. That is true. It seems like she is introduced basically as the excuse for that vengeance, but his relationship, as it turns out, with Allah is how you would say the Old English name. That AE should be squished together, and that's called an ash. That's an old letter in Old English, and it's pronounced just like ash, Allah. So would be the Old English pronunciation. But you can call him Al if you want. Or whatever you want, but anyway, that was a cool touch, I thought. And he had set that up earlier because there was that battle. It was even they met in the first book actually, where he had been sent with some treasure to buy off Allah in order to make their attack, on their fellow Briton possible. So yeah, that was cool. And as I said before, this meta thing that Cornwell has going on is one of my favorite aspects of the book, of the trilogy. The idea that he has a frame narrative here with Derfel in the present, and this story is his retelling at the instigation of Igraine, who is pregnant. Hooray, finally. And I love he's almost kind of fatherly with her, but they sort of tease each other. And, that's a sweet little, thing they've got going there. And they have this secret. I am curious how Sansom keeps surviving even after doing the most vile things. and somehow he even is at the point where he's elevated to where he is, and he's still doing the same horrible stuff. Like, it's implied very strongly that that kid was, he took that kid to his bed, and he's saint, sends him, and that kid is saint whatever, and so he's still doing the same horrible things. So how does this guy keep getting away with it? He's somebody I wouldn't mind seeing get his comeuppance. There is the moment where Derfel does smack him, right? And says, "Here, this will make it more convincing," because Sansom is playing both sides. He's like, "Oh, I'm giving you this information, so when you guys win, remember, I helped you," But he's loathsome. He's horrible. Yeah.
Sansom has slithered on his belly through, so much and managed to come out on top. Essentially a bishop. He marries Morgan and then converts her. That's a huge loss for the pagan side.
Yeah.
When Samson, marries Morgan, and they start training missionaries to spread Christianity like that.
Well, she steals all of Merlin's, the 12 treasures, and
she steals the treasures.
Yeah.
But yeah, Derfel, yes, and it's Derfel is essentially, the good guy. But yes, when the revenge enacted for his daughter's death seemed very over the top. But again, I'm not making excuses for Derfel. You can almost empathize if someone killed your infant daughter. What would you want done to that person in an ancient context? What kind of vengeance would you? How far would you go with your vengeance? But horrible. But Derfel also goes through the rise and fall of his status. You know what I mean? I mean, part of Derfel's thing was that Derfel's issues was, he was poor, right? He's married to this common law, not married because
not even married technically.
Tywin says she will never marry, but she will essentially be Derfel's wife, and she bears his children, and they're definitely a couple. But he goes through the loss of status. At Mordred's ascension, Mordred is finally taking the reins of power, and you'll forget the pronunciation again. I'll say Colwich, but that's not how you pronounce it. I know, but Coach abandons Mordred, he challenges him and denounces him, and technically because Derfel's a champion, that's who he'd have to fight. But of course, they're best buddies, so they're not going to fight. Which withdraws. But then Derfel's dismissed, smacked by Mordred, and he's dismissed as champion, right? For that. So Derfel goes through a lot in this book. But ultimately, I think, as much as perhaps his good reputation for the reader is tarnished by the way he exacts his vengeance, I think we're all still very much rooting for him. I think we're, and again, I think part of the brilliance of this book is, like with all first-person narratives and with this frame narrative, we know that Derfel survived their old age. So, Cornwell, though, still manages, the part of his skill is that he still manages us to make us feel angst for Derfel, knowing that, whatever fight he goes into, he's obviously going to survive. Yeah. But it's what might happen to him, what tragedy he might face, what might happen to his family. That's always, the thing that keeps you, on the edge of your seat. And I think it's brilliant.
Oh, I'll tell you what I'm dreading. I am dreading how Kynwyn is going to die and the other two daughters. But it's just like, oh, whoa, he loses everybody. At some point. I hope that some of them got to live a little longer, but it's got me a little bit anxious for what happens in the third book. Like, does it get worse? Does it get darker than the second?
It's pretty dark. I memean, yes, because in from the first book and the second book, it's very much Derfel very much states that everyone that he knew from the time of Arthur is essentially dead.
Everybody said it's Sanson. Yeah, everybody except for that jerk.
Yeah, is dead. So but we shall see, Philip, how the third book turns out. I want to go back quickly and there was a comment from really early on the chat. It was from Heidi. She wanted, since we're into spoilers, she wanted us to each pick our favorite moment from as we're winding down here from the book. So I know what mine is, Philip, but I'll give you I'll let you go first. Can you isolate a favorite moment from this book that really stood out to you?
Oh, in all honesty, I don't suppose there's any cheese. Yeah. When Merlin, by the way, okay, it's magic when he's revived inside the cauldron and dead Merlin is alive. Or okay, so Nimue insisted he was alive, not dead, but Kainun was pretty sure he's not breathing, right? But I love that when he wakes up, he's like, "Give me some cheese, man. I want cheese. I got a craving." Yeah, and then Merlin made me laugh a lot in this. I'm glad of his presence in this, even though I know he's a cunning fellow too and ruthless in his own way. But it was much needed laughter, I would say. There are a lot of great books that would be really, really tough to read if there weren't some comic relief here and there. So I'm glad Merlin was there. So I'm picking that. I don't suppose there's any cheese. Yeah.
That's a great choice, Philip. Mine is certainly not as positive, but it's actually the ending of the book because as I said before, part of my issues with Arthur, I was so confounded and frustrated with that. But when he finally at the end of the book says, I'm going to take over Britain. Mordred will stay a king for life, but I'm going to rule. He's not fit. But when he finally, it's about time, right? Yeah. So that and essentially the fulfilling of, in some ways, his destiny that he is to be a British ruler whose name is going to live on throughout history is when he finally takes the reins and decides that because they've had this council and Mordred's had his wards and but now Arthur is finally saying, okay, I'm going to rule Britain because I'm the best person best suited. And of course that sense of pathos, because if you'd only done that from the start, perhaps 90% of the tragedies wouldn't have happened in the first place. But so that is actually at the end of the book, that is my highlight, when Arthur finally takes the reins. And it is that last line says, but for us who had kept our oaths, is what we had always wanted. For now, in all but name, Arthur was king, and that was it was a great conclusion for me. That knowing that at least we all know that tragedy is around the corner, but at least for a time, Arthur is the one in charge of Britain. So
yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Great book. I'm excited for Excalibur. Yeah.
Yeah. Quickly, Mark says,
the Necromancer wedding. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's there were so many. I mean, we could talk all day about all the great Amazon books, but I'm so happy, Philip, that you enjoyed Enemy of God. For me, this is my favorite book in the trilogy. This is marvelous, and again, we're going to say fantasy. We've decided that again. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I've decided that's going to come down squarely in the ambit of.
We're going to write Bernard Cornwell and tell him that we love his fantasy.
Yes, let's see what he says. So what hopefully will happen next is that Philip came up with a wonderful idea that perhaps we gather the wonderful Two to Ramble, as well as the brothers Gwyn, and for the final book, which is entitled Excalibur, as we said, we can have a big group discussion on Philip's channel to wrap up the trilogy. And folks, by then, perhaps, and he may not be ready to make any pronouncements at that time, but Philip may have an idea where this trilogy ranks on his list of top series of all time, which was always my burning question from the time we started this, from the time we started this endeavor to read these books, which are my favorite trilogy.
Your favorite trilogy of all time, PL?
Yeah,
Yes.
it finally unseated Lord of the Rings, and I didn't think that was ever going to
That's
happen.
no pressure at all on me, right?
Well, I know it's not going to unseat Lord of the Rings for you. I know Tolkien. I mean, you're a Tolkien scholar; it's not happening. But I am curious though to hear from you at the end, and you may not be ready to say that even by the time we do the final video, but to see whether or not where this ranks in your top series, or if it makes it. It might not, but I know for me it certainly does. So.
Yeah. Well, I can guarantee one thing, and it will definitely, one of these books at least will, or I don't know, I'm always making up my own rules for these things. So if I have end of the year video where I'm like, these were my favorite reads of the year, the name Bernard Cornwell will be mentioned in that video for sure. So yeah.
Well, that warms my heart. And yes, Heidi's correct. All the interviews I've seen with Cornwell is that this series, even over and above his Saxon stories, Last Kingdom, however you'd like to describe that series of books, this is his favorite.
You should write some more fantasy then.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting up there now. I think he's in his 80s now, so perhaps he's. I think he finished off his Shark series. I can't remember, but I think he's definitely winding down. But who knows? And Heidi says also it's his second favorite series.
Okay.
So high praise from a discerning reader. So, well, Phil, I think we did a pretty good job in.
We did all right.
Yeah, I think we did all right covering Enemy of God. I mean, there's a lot to cover, and we could have gone a lot of different directions. But so this has been such an honor and a pleasure chatting with you about this series. Your insights are also wonderful. I just love hanging out with you. It is a privilege. Again, I'm so looking forward to you eventually getting to Excalibur, getting the capstone on the series, and hearing your thoughts. And perhaps we get to hear the thoughts of Tudor Rambo and the esteemed brothers Gwyn as well. So that would be awesome.
All right, we'll do it.
So for everyone who dropped in the live and everyone who's going to watch this on replay, thank you so much for your participation. And you are what makes this type of long-form content amazing. All hail long-form content. Despite what anyone says, I think it's one of the best parts of this space. So for Philip and I, we're signing off. Until next time, as Philip would say.